first thing, a lot of times when we get a parasha title, we look at that word and we try and find how that's relevant to the whole message of this week's parasha. And with the word behold, it's pretty powerful. I mean, this is this concept of to observe, to look at, to see. And so the question is, if this week's parasha is about seeing something, beholding something, it's to make that observation, then what observation, what are we supposed to behold? Well, this parasha starts off in Deuteronomy 11:26, and we'll just read this first 26 through 28. It says, "Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of Yodewaheh your Elohim, which I command you this day, and a curse if you'll not obey the commandments of Yodewaheh your Elohim, but turn aside out of the way which I command you this day, to go after other Elohim which you have not known." So the first thing that I ask you is, did you behold? You read the first part. What did you observe? What did you see? Well, hopefully what you saw was that he's setting before you a choice, a blessing and a cursing. There's two things being set here. There's not three things. There's not blessing, cursing, and salvation. These two are separate or anything like that. There's two things he's setting before you today, a blessing and a cursing. And in verse 27 it says, what is the blessing? A blessing if you obey the commandments. Okay, so now we know that this blessing, what we're supposed to behold, is the difference between a blessing and a cursing. And what decides if you're blessed or cursed is whether or not you obey the commandments. And that's a big thing. So a lot of people don't behold. They don't behold this out of this week's parasha, because if you ask them, they're going to tell you things like, well, like you ask a question, do we have to keep the commandments? Well, that makes people squirm. They say, well, we don't have to be saved. Many will say, you don't have to keep the commandments to be saved. That's a separate issue. There's the blessings, the cursings, and salvation. To which case I ask them, well, is salvation a blessing or a cursing? Where would that fit in the categories? I think it's a blessing to be saved, and I think that can be pointed out in the scriptures. So I still think it goes over here in the obeying the commandments category. But you ask, well, did you behold that if you don't obey, it's a cursing? Because see, a lot of these people who say, well, you know, and I've heard many Messianics say it, it's a Christian baggage theology from Christianity, which is, look, we're on the simplified plan. We don't have to obey the commandments. I mean, Messianics run around saying, look at how great we are. We have the Torah. But out of the other side of their mouth, they say, well, you don't really need to obey all of them. Nobody can obey all of them, which is a total lie. And they say, you know, well, blessings, you know, you don't need to obey for salvation. You know, you can get your blessing over here, which is salvation, supposedly the biggest blessing out of the scriptures according to them. And then on the other side, what they kind of forget is they didn't behold the second half, which is verse 28, which it's the curse if you don't obey. So some of them will say, well, gosh, you know, you don't have to keep the commandments in order to be saved. That's just if you want extra blessings. But that's not what the scriptures say. The scriptures say if you don't, it isn't just, oh, do this for extra blessings, and if you don't, no problem. It's just your free choice. It says if you don't, the alternative is you'll be cursed. This is a cursing over here. And somehow they think that they'll be saved even though they're cursed. And that doesn't work out with the Torah very well. So next thing is, most people, the reason why this happens is in religion, they behold what they want. Why are there so many religions? Why are they so different? Because they all have the same Bible, but they choose to behold what they want. They don't behold verse 28 that says it's a curse if they don't obey. Somehow that gets not beholden. And the behold part comes from, oh, but I'm saved over here, you know, through the blood of Mashiach, or I'm going to behold these things, these blessings that I'm going to get. They choose to behold what they want to behold. And this is a part of religion. Each religion is simply different depending on what they choose to see, what they choose to observe. Instead of observing what's there in its entirety, the good and the bad, they choose to observe what they want. And you can see this in the New Testament. Well, we do some of the New Testament stuff, and then they behold that a little bit more than what they beholded in the Old Testament, which was something separate. And this goes to one of the first fundamental rules, which is what came first. The very first sin that we have in the Scriptures is a simple question of what came first. The question that Satan tempted Hava with was the meaning of what Yodewahe said. But Yodewahe first said, don't eat from that tree. And then the serpent later came and challenged what they'd already knew and said, well, you know, maybe there's something different. There's a different interpretation. What he really meant was blah, blah, blah. Or what you can do, you know, if you do this, you're going to be wise. You know, there's a reinterpretation that came later. Now, in this scenario, there was a right way. There was a blessing that was going to come and a curse. The curse came because they accepted the latter interpretation. They didn't stick with what Elohim said first. And this takes us to this concept right here. We even see it in this week's Parashat. Deuteronomy 13:1. It says, if there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, where he spake unto you, saying, let us go after other Elohim, which you have not known. Let us serve them. It says in 13:3, you shall not hearken unto the words of that prophet or the dreamer of dreams. For, and this is the reason why, for Yodewahe, your Elohim, proves you or tests you to know whether you love Yodewahe, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul. So, here we have a scenario where Yodewahe said one thing, then he allowed a prophet to come. Even the prophet did signs, and they actually came true, and all these other things, which you shouldn't be looking for anyway, because what you should be doing is listen to what Yodewahe said in the first place, and not change from that. This pattern happens over and over again. The prophet who was told not to eat or drink and stopped when he went to do his prophecy. What happened? Then Yodewahe sent another prophet to tell him that Yodewahe said, you should come eat with me. Why? Because he's testing him to see if he'll listen to what he said in the first place. Even it said he was sent from Yodewahe. But this goes to Malachi 3:6, which says, for I am Yodewahe, I change not. Psalms 89:34 says, my covenant will I not break, nor alter the thing that has gone out of my lips. That's a tough one for all the new covenant people, because this says it's not going to happen that way. Testing of the people with the prophets. I mean, that's what we saw, is Yodewahe will send a test to you once he says something. So everybody wants to believe these, oh, but in Hebrews it says this. I'm sorry, is that Genesis? Does that override what Deuteronomy said? Because what said first is probably going to be more true than what is said later. It can't change it. It can only increase or expand upon what was said. So, have things changed? They haven't changed. You know, everyone wants to think, we got a new covenant. We got Mashiach did this. Oh, you know, that was in those times, the dispensation. Things don't change. That's just part of the lie of the enemy. And so many people have bought that lie. This parasha teaches us not to add or diminish. And that's what that does. Changes diminish something, or they add to it. That's what a change does. Here's where it was. You're either going to add something to it, or you're going to say, well, we don't have to do that anymore. Oh, but we do have to do this, and now it's salvation. Before it was obedience. Well, now it's, you know, oh, we don't have to be obedient. You know, they're adding to and taking away. So this whole parasha, really, these lies are like a snake. They get around your neck, and before you know it, they move slowly. Before you know it, it's too late. You know, there's always a bribe in it. Oh, salvation without works. That's not dependent on obedience. The bribe is, you don't have to do stuff. You don't have to feel the guilt of not doing stuff. That reminds me of John the Baptist. He told the king that he shouldn't have done this. And so what they do? Cut off his head. And that's exactly the pattern that salvation does. It cuts off the head or authority of Yodewahe and his commandments in order that you wouldn't feel the guilt of caring about what you do. And it's a total lie. It's an infiltration of the camp that only can be allowed if you let it in. It's like a vampire. You know, if you don't let it in, it can't harm you. But if you let it in because there's a bribe in it for you, then it can harm you. This week's parasha ends with kosher, which is exactly that concept. What you bring in can either defile you or make you clean. Until next week, Shabbat Shalom.